Om Shuklam Bharataram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantahe. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vetvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Agajanana Patmarkam Gajanana Maharnisham Anekadantam Bhaktanam Ekadantam Upasmahe Shri Mahaganapataye Namaha Gurave Sarva Lokanam Bhishaje Bhavaroginam Nidhaye Sarva Vidyanam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Asmad Guru Charanaravindaabhyam Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Jnananandamayan Devam Nirmalasphatiकाकृतिम् Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Shri Hayagrivam Upasmahe Shri Hayagrivamurthaye Namaha Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambam Karishyami Siddhir Bhavatu Me Sada Shri Mahasaraswatye Namaha Uma Komala Hastabja Sambhavitalatakam Hiranyakundalam Vande Kumaram Pushkarasrajam Vetrivel Muruganek Har Harohara Lokaviryam Mahapujyam Sarvarakshakaram Vibhum Parvati Hridayanandam Shastaram Pranamamyaham Swamiye Sharanamayappa Vagarta Biva Sampraktau Vagarta Pratipattahe Jagadah Pitarau Vande Parvati Parameshwarau Shri Parvati Parameshwarabhyam Namaha Kohalam Kujayan Venum Shyamalohyam Kumarakah Vedavedyam Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Asmad Guru Charanaravindaabhyam Namaha Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murare Shri Natha Narayana Vasudeva Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murare Shri Natha Narayana Vasudeva Shri Krishna Govinda Hare Murare Shri Natha Narayana Vasudeva Pitambaram Karavirajita Chakra Shanka Kaumodaki Sarasijam Karuna Samudram Radha Sahayam Atisundara Mandahasam Vatalayesham Anisham Hridibhavayami Krishno Rakshatumam Charachara Guruho Krishnam Namasye Sadha Krishne Neva Surakshito Hamasakritam Krishnaya Dattam Hanaha Krishna Deva Samudbhavo Mama Vibho Krishnasya Dasosmyaham Krishne Bhakti Rachancalastu Bhagavan He Krishna Tubhyam Namaha Shri Guruvayurappa Sharanam Namranam Sannhidatte Satatamapi Purastairanabhyartitanapi Artan Kamanajastram Vitarati Paramananda Sandram Gatim Cha Itham Nisheshalabhyo Niravadika Phalah Parijato Hare Tvam Kshudram Tam Shakravati Dhrumam Abhilashati Vyartamarte Vrajohyam Shri Guruvayurappa Sharanam Shri Bhattapadam Anisham Hridibhavayami Vamshi Vibhushita Karat Navaniradaabhat Pitambarat Arunabhimba Phaladharoshtat Purnendu Sundaramukat Arabindhanetrat Krishnat Param Kimapi Tattvamaham Najane Kairandum Kupinyan Vindu Mirakunnu Niraja Lochana Ninodhai Etinu Manyane Kumbirenda Toro Pritiyil Niyenne Palekennai Krishna Hare Jaya Krishna Hare Jaya Krishna Hare Jaya Krishna Hare. Welcome everyone. Auspicious day of Vaikunta Ekadasi yesterday and today for some, but still it's still today. So all right, so we'll do a quick review of 15 and 17. Let me just see. Purna, are you on? I don't see Purna. Okay. So, Vaidehi, which one can you do? 15?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Vaidehi.
Shall I start?
Please, yeah.
Okay. मतिरिह गुणसक्ता बन्धुकृत्येष्वसक्ता तु अमृतकृतु परुन्दे भक्तियोगस्तु शक्तिं महदनुद्गमलभ्या भक्तिरेवात्र साध्या कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः प्रकृतिमहदहङ्काराश्च मात्राश्च भूतानि अपि हृदपि दशाक्षी पुरुषः पञ्चविंशः इति विदित विभागो मुच्यते सौ प्रकृत्या कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः प्रकृतिगतगुणौकैः नाज्यते पुरुषोऽयं यदि तु सजति तस्यां तद्गुणास्तं भजेरन् मदनुभजन तत्त्वालोचनैः साप्य पेयात् कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः विमलमतिरुपात्तैः आसनाद्यैर्मदङ्गं गरुडसमधिरूढं दिव्यभूषायुधाङ्कं रुचितुलिततमालं शीलयोतानुवेलं कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवन्यगादीः
Third line, Sheela Yetanuvelam. Sheela Yetanuvelam. And yes, we said Yotanu, just a small correction.
Okay. शीलयेतानुवेलं मम गुणगणलीला कर्णनैः कीर्तनाद्यैः मयि सुरसरिदोघ प्रख्यचित्तानुवृत्तिः भवति परमभक्तिः सा हि मृत्योर्विजेत्री कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः अहह बहुलहिंसा सञ्चितार्थैः कुटुम्बं प्रतिदिनमनुपुष्णन् स्त्रीजितो बाललाली विशतिः गृहसक्तो यातनां मय्य भक्तः कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः युवति जठरकिन्नो जातबोधोऽप्यकाण्डे प्रसवगलितबोधः पीडयोलङ्घ्य बाल्यम् पुनरपि बत मुह्यत्येव तारुण्यकाले कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः पितृसुरगणयाजी धार्मिको यो गृहस्थः स च निपतति काले दक्षिणाद्वोपगामी मयि निहितमकामं कर्मतूदक्पतार्थं कपिलतनुरितित्वं देवहूत्यै न्यगादीः इति सुवदितवेद्यां देवहे देवहूतिं कृतनुतिमनुगृह्य त्वं गतो योगिसङ्घैः विमलमतिरथासौ भक्तियोगेन मुक्ता त्वमपि जनहितार्थं वर्तसे प्रागुदीच्याम्.
The first line, iti suvidita vedhyam. Suvidita.
Okay. Iti suvidita vedyam. Okay. परम किमु बहुत्या त्वत्पदाम्भोज भक्तिं सकल भय विनेत्रीं सर्वकामोपनेत्रीं वदसि खलु दृढं त्वं तद्विदूयामयान्मे गुरुपवनपुरेश त्वय्युपादत्स्व भक्तिं. श्रीकृष्णाय परब्रह्मणे नमः.
The second line, right? Just a small correction. Sakala bhaya vinetrim. It's a long E, right? So just remember to stretch that one. Sakala bhaya vinetrim. Okay.
Sakala bhaya vinetrim.
Yep.
Okay.
Purna, can you do 17? Purna, can you do 17?
Yeah, sure.
I think till whatever we did, I think we did until 9.
17 Dasakam, right?
Ama. Yes.
Uttanapada, this one, right?
Yeah, that one.
Uvacharita Varnanam. Okay. Can you just say the tune once?
Uttanapada nripater manunandanasya.
Uttanapada nrupater manunandanasya jaya babhuva suruchirnitaramabhishta anya sunitiriti bharturanadrita sa tvameva nityamagati sharanam gata bhut anke pitusuruchi पुत्रकमुत्तमं तं दृष्ट्वा ध्रुवः किल सुतोधिरोक्ष्यन् आचिक्षिपे किल शिशुः सुतरां सुरुच्या दुस्सन्त्यजा खलु भवद्विमुखैरसूया त्वन्मोहिते पितरि पश्यति दारवश्ये दूरं दुरुक्ति निहतः स गतो निजाम्बां सापि स्वकर्म गतिसन्तरणाय पुंसां त्वत्पादमेव शरणं शिववे शशंस.
Sorry, do you have 2 lines or 4 lines? What do you have in your book?
4 lines.
Okay, so at the end of every line, there is a comma, unless we explicitly put a plus. I think you are joining those 2 things, right?
Okay.
Okay, and then the last line, Shishave. Tvatpadameva sharanam shishave shashamsa.
Okay. Tvatpadameva sharanam shishave shashamsa. आकण्यसोऽपि भवदर्चन निश्चितात्मा मानी निरेत्य नगरात् किल पञ्चवर्षः सन्दृष्टनारद निवेदितमन्त्रमार्गः त्वामारराध तपसा मधुकाननान्ते.
22 every part.
What was that?
No, go ahead.
ताते विषण्ण हृदये नगरीं गतेन श्रीनारदेन परिसान्त्वित चित्तवृत्तौ बालस्त्वदर्पित मनः क्रमवर्धितेन निन्ये कठोर तपसा किल पंचमासान.
Here the first 2 lines after Nagarim Gatena, there is a plus, and then you say Sri Naradena. Okay, so that comes together. Okay, keep going.
Sure. तावत्तपोबलनिरुच्छ्वसिते दिगन्ते देवार्थितस्त्वमुदयत्मरुणार्द्रचेताः त्वद्रूपचिद्रस सनिलीनमते स्फुरस्तादाविर्भभूविथ विभो गरुडाधिरूढः.
So the third line, Purastat, it ends with it, right? In the third line. So next line is Avir Bhabu with it. Okay.
त्वद्रूपचिद्रसनिलीनमते पुरस्तात् आविर्बभूविथ विभो गरुडाधिरूढः. त्वद्दर्शनप्रमदभारतरङ्गितं तं दृग्भ्यां निमग्नमिव रूपरसायनेते तुष्टाशमाणमवगम्य कपोलदेशे संस्पृष्टवानसि धरणे तथादरेण.
Third line,
तुष्टूषमाणमवगम्य कपोलदेशे संस्पृष्टवानसि धरणे तथादरेण.
Samsprishtavanasi Darena Tathadarena. Middle Harena. Yeah.
तावद्विबोध विमलं प्रणुवन्तमेन मा भाषथास्त्वमवगम्य तदीयभावम् राज्यं चिरं समनुभूय भजस्व भूयः सर्वोत्तरं ध्रुवपदं विनिवृत्तिहीनम्.
Here the first line, pranuvantam enam, im, it ends with the im, comma, and then abhasha. Next line. Okay.
Sure. Ityuchishittvai gate nrupanandanosa. Here also it ends.
Nripanandanosau.
Okay. Nrupanandanosau.
Anandita.
Ananditakhila jano nagarimupetaha रेमे चिरं भवदनुग्रह पूर्णकामः ताते गते च वनमादृत राज्यभारः.
Yeah, very good. So that's where we stopped last time. So for today's class, so Tulsi, you can be a student. Gopiji, you can be a student for the first half, and then second, Meera, you can be a student, and Deepa, you can be a student. Actually, Deepa, you said you are driving, right? So you can't.
I think I should be home another 10 minutes, hopefully.
Okay. I think you can be for the second half. So
okay, thank you.
So right now I said Tulsi and Gopiji, right? Okay. So stanza 10. Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshaisa yuddha nirato virato manukya shantya prasanna hridaya dhanadadupetat tvat bhaktimeva sudrudham abrunon mahatma. So we saw in the last stanza how, after Dhruva kind of comes back, and then his father eventually, when the time comes, and the king Uttanapada now retires to the forest, and Dhruva then takes over the kingdom and all that. So all of that is happening in the last stanza. So here what's happening then is later on, once Dhruva becomes big, so his brother Uttama, he doesn't get married and all that. Eventually he goes to the Himalayas on hunting expedition, and there he then gets killed by a yaksha in the Himalayan mountain, and his mother also, Suruchi, also follows him, and she also dies. Anyway, so Dhruva then goes to fight against them, and then when he's about to defeat them, then when the war is going on, at the time Manu, who is his grandfather, then comes and tells him to stop the fight and not to kill anybody. So he doesn't do that. So when that happens, then Kubera and others who are all really pleased with Dhruva come and ask him, what boon do you want? So he says, I don't want anything except Tvat bhaktim eva sudrudham. I only want your devotion, bhaktim sudrudham, in a very firm fashion. So I want to be firmly devoted to the Lord. He says, that's all I want. Dhruva then comes back. So yakshena deva nihate punar uttamesmin. If you want, you can break at the ra there. So punar uttamesmin or punaruttamesmin together, comma. Yakshaihi is there, put a is to join. Yakshais sa yuddha nirato birato manuktya. Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshais sa yuddha nirato birato manuktya.
Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshai saha yuddha nirato virato manukya.
Second line, yakshai sa, there's no saha there. So yakshai sa yuddha nirato.
Sure. Yakshai sa. Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshai sa yuddha nirato virato manukya.
Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshai sa yuddha nirato virato manukya. Yakshena deva nihate punaruttamesmin yakshai sa yuddha nirato virato manukya.
Shantya prasanna, double na, prasanna hridayad dhanadad upeta. So dhanadad, you can break it down in a couple of places. So prasanna hridayad dhanadad upetat, put a it at the end of that line. Dhanadad upetat, comma. Next line you will have two its in Sanskrit. I'm saying two it, you can remove one of them. So it's just tvad bhaktimeva Sudridham Avrunon Mahatma. So that ma that is there, you can break it there. So Sudridham Avrunon Mahatma. Shantya Prasanna Hridaya Dhanadadupetat Tvadbhaktimeva Sudridham Avrunon Mahatma.
Shantya prasanna hrudayadhanadadupetat Tvatbhaktimeva sudruda mavruno mahatma.
Let's break it as Sudridham Avrunon Mahatma. If you're pausing or breaking, break it at that im there. Okay.
Can you repeat that
Yeah.
again? Sudruda?
Sudridham im Sudridham Avrunon Mahatma.
Sure. Shantya prasanna hrudayadhanadadupetat Tvatbhaktimeva sudrudam avruno mahatma.
Shantya prasanna hridayat dhanadatu petad Bhaktimeva sudridham avruno mahatma. Shantya prasanna hridayat dhanadatu petad Bhaktimeva sudridham avruno mahatma. Mahatma.
Stanza 11. Ante bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade mudito yamaste evam swabhritya janapalana loladhistvam vatalayadhipanirundhi mamamayoghan. So finally, when the time came for Dhruva to depart, right? So then Bhavat Purusha. So your messengers, O Lord, your messengers came Vimanayato in a celestial car or an aerial vehicle. So your messengers came and then took Dhruva along with Matra Samam, along with his mother. They went and now they are still settled in the Dhruva Loka. That's the pole star we refer to, right? So that particular planet. So they still settled there. So that, O Guruva, Lord of Guruvayur, who you protected Dhruva, who was a 5-year boy, right? 5-year-old boy who did all this meditation. Similarly, please protect me as well. And Nirundi Mamama Yogan, please eradicate all the diseases and the ailments I'm having. So, Ante Bhavat Purusha Nita Vimana Yato, comma, Matra Samam Dhruva Pade Muditoya Maste. So try to say that together. Muditoya Maste. Ante bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade muditoya maste.
Ante bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade mudito yamaste. Ante bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade mudito yamaste.
Ande bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade mudito yamaste. Ande bhavat purushanita vimanayato matra samam dhruvapade mudito yamaste.
Evam swa bhritya jana palana lola dhistvam, comma. So you can easily break that. Swabhritya jana palana lola dhistvam, comma. Vatalayadhipa nirundhi mamama yoghan. So that's one word. Mamama yoghan. Evam swabhritya jana palana lola dhistvam vatalayadhipa nirundhi mamama yoghan.
Evam swabhritya janapalana loladistvam vatalayadipa nirundi mamama yogan. Evam swabhritya janapalana loladistvam vatalayadipa nirundi mamayamaugan.
Mamama yoghan.
Mamama yogan.
Evam swabhritya janapalana loladhistvam vatalayadhiva nirundi mamamayokhan. एवं स्वभृत्य जनपालनलोलधीस्त्वं वातालयाधिप निरुन्धि ममामयोखान्.
Shri Krishnaya Parabrahmane Namaha. So it completes 17. So we'll jump forward to 22. So 22 is also a very interesting chapter, right? It's a devotee called Ajamila. So it's about Ajamila. So it's Ajamilo Upakyanam about Ajamila. So I think the core, when Parikshit is talking to Sukha Parikshit is asking Sukha that people commit a lot of sins in their lifetimes. So what can they be doing to get rid of their sins, right? And what is the right way to do it? So Sukha tells that anybody who is doing any actions expecting some material output out of it or any output out of it, saying that I'm praying, I want to get something in return. I'm doing an action, I want to get something in return. So anybody who is doing any action, any karma with some fruitive expectations is bound to commit sins, because it's impossible for that person to do that karma in a non-sinful way. So it's very obvious that they are going to eventually end up committing some sin or the other, because they're always expecting for something in return, and that motivates them to do something which is not appropriate or not correct. So then then Parikshit asks, okay, so what is the way to get out of it? So he says, look, if you have committed some sins, then there are some ways you can atone for your sins, but he doesn't say it is as simple as, like, we say go to the temple and break a coconut and all of a sudden your sins have all vanished, right? So it's not that easy. There is a lot of repent that needs to happen, and you have to go through a very strenuous process, right, that needs to happen to atone for the sins. But then he says the problem with it is, like, if you've been to India, and especially if you've gone to Kerala, you see all the elephants which just come out of, they bath the elephants, it comes out clean, but then the first thing it does when it comes out, it takes the mud and puts it on it again. So he says the problem with the atonement is you do it, go through a laborious process to get rid of your sins, but then it doesn't remove your tendency to commit the sin again. It only eliminates what you've already done. You are still inclined to commit another sin, right? So he says, so he then Parikshit then asks, what do I do? So he says, okay, let me tell you about the story about somebody called as an Ajamila, a Brahmin, a Veda Pandit called Ajamila, and let me tell you his story. So that's how this story starts. So this is also about a devotee called Ajamila. So with that background, stanza 1. Ajamilo nama mahi surah pura charan vibho dharma patan grihashrami guror gira kananametya drishtavan sudhrishta shilam kulatam madakulam. So long time back, there was this Brahmin called as Ajamila, who was, in this case, is the grihashrami, right? So he says he's a married, but even before that is, he was born in a very traditional Brahmin family. His father was also a Vedic Pandit, and he's also, Ajamila also had learned all the Vedas at a really young age. And then he was a man of the highest conduct, right, of very high virtue, and he was doing all the right things, following very, very high character as well. So eventually he gets married, right? He becomes grihashrami. And even then he was dharma patan. Even though he was married, he was always following the righteous ways, and he always had his mind and senses, everything in control. And his father was his guru. So one day his father tells him that they had to do some yagam, and they say, you go to the forest to go fetch me some wood sticks, right? So some dharba grass and everything. So he goes. And when he goes to the forest, he then sees a prostitute, right, who is with some other man. And here it specifically says this prostitute is Kulata Madakula. She was drunk, and then she was doing, not non-virtuous acts, because she's a prostitute. So she was with somebody. He sees this lady with somebody, and that's what is happening in the first stanza. So Ajamilo Nama Mahisuraha is that, put a if, Mahisurah Pura, comma, Charan Vibho Dharma Pathan Grihashrami. Ajamilo nama mahisurah pura charan vibho dharma patan grihashrami.
Ajamilo nama mahisurah pura charan vibho dharma patan grihashrami. Ajamilo nama mahisurah pura charan vibho dharma patan grihashrami.
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 अजामिलो नाम महिसुरः पुरा चरन् विभो धर्मपथान् गृहाश्रमी अजामिलो नाम महिसुरः पुरा चरन् विभो धर्मपथान् गृहाश्रमी
Guror gira kananam etya, or you can say it together, kananam etya drishtavan, comma, sudhrishta shilam kulatam madakulam. Guror gira kananam etya drishtavan, sudhrishta shilam kulatam madakulam.
गुरोर्गिरा काननमेत्य दृष्टवान् सुदृष्टशीलां कुलटां मदाकुलां गुरोर्गिरा काननमेत्य दृष्टवान् सुदृष्टशीलां कुलटां मदाकुलां
गुरोर्गिरा काननमेत्य दृष्टवान् सुधृष्टशीलां कुलडां मदाकुलाम् गुरोर्गिरा काननमेत्य दृष्टवान् सुधृष्टशीलां कुलडां मदाकुलाम्
Stanza 2. Swatah prashantopi tadha hritāshayah swadharmamutsrajyataya samaraman adharmakari dashami bhavan punah dadhau bhavan namayute sute ratim. So now when Ajamila sees this prostitute there in the forest, he then immediately he starts getting distracted. So of course he's a very learned person, right? So he knows how he has to control his mind and senses. So he controls it for a while, but then he still could not resist as much. Eventually he comes back home, and the next few days he keeps thinking about her, and he starts spending his father's money on her, like buying her gifts and all that stuff. Eventually he brings her home as a servant and keeps her in his home as a servant. And after a couple of months or something, he actually leaves the house. He marries her. He decides to marry or go live with her. So he abandons his wife and abandons his kids, and then he leaves home, and then he goes and stays with the prostitute. Now, again, all of this detailed story is in Bhagavatam, but every part is just touching on the key points. I'm just giving you some context as well. So then what happens is, now he's married to her. Now he has to maintain, like in a sense, she has a lot of demands. So he's not able to make money. So what he does is, that's when he becomes adharmakari. He now starts resorting to unfair means. He starts cheating people, he starts stealing things, and he starts doing all these things which he never was doing, because he was just so much, taken over by her. And eventually they have 10 kids, Dashami Punaha. They have 10 kids between them. However, one kid, the last kid that he has, he then names it Bhavan Nama. He gives that last child your name. He gives the child Narayana, was the name of the last child that he has. And that particular child, because that child has had some, I think, in Bhagavatam it says, he could not talk properly, he could not walk properly. So that maybe he had some physical inabilities, right? So he was very attached to that child, and he was always spending time with that last child. So swataha is there, put a if. Swatah prashantopi tada hritāshayah, comma, swa dharmam utsrijya. You can break at that second ma if you want. Dharmam utsrijya taya samaraman. Swatah prashantopi tada hritāshayah swadharmam utsrijya taya samaraman.
स्वतः प्रशान्तोऽपि तदा हृताशयः स्वधर्ममृत्युज्य तया समारमन् स्वतः प्रशान्तोऽपि तदा हृताशयः स्वधर्ममृत्युज्य तया समारमन्.
In the second line, swadharma utsrijya. It's easy to break it at that second ma as a im. That way you won't make that mistake. So swadharmam utsrijya.
स्वधर्मम् उत्स्युज्य तया समारमन्.
स्वतः प्रसन्दोऽपि तदा हृताशयः स्वधर्ममुत्सृज्य तया समारमन् स्वतः प्रसन्दोऽपि तदा हृताशयः स्वधर्ममुत्सृज्य तया समारमन्
Adharmakari dashami bhavan punaha. Put a visarga at the end of that word line, punaha, and then a comma. Next line on top of the first da, if you have a ir, remove that off. So dadhau bhavan nama. So two nas coming there. Bhavan nama yute sute ratim. Adharmakari dashami bhavan punaha dadhau bhavan nama yute sute ratim.
अधर्मकारी दशमी भवन पुनः ददौ भवन नाम युते सुते रतिम् अधर्मकारी दशमी भवन पुनः ददौ भवन नाम युते सुते रतिम्
अधर्मकारी दशमी भवन् पुनः दधौ भवन्नाम युते सुते रतिम् अधर्मकारी दशमी भवन् पुनः दधौ भवन्नाम युते सुते रतिम्
Stanza 3. Samrityukale yamaraj kinkaran bhayankaran strin abhilakshayan dhiya puramanak tvatsmriti vasana balate juhavanarayana namakam sutam. So now Ajamila becomes old. He's almost 80 years old, and or he spends 80 years with her, something like that. She's very old right now. And then when Mrityukale, now the time of his death approaches, right? He's become very old and weak, and he's about to die. So when he dies, or literally is about to die, then he actually sees or he visualizes Yamaraja Kinkaran, the messengers of Yama. So three messengers of Yama, he's visualizing them coming and standing in front of him, and Bhayankaran Strin. So they are all like, they look very, like he was fearful when he looked at them, right? When he looked at the way they appeared in front of him, and he was really now petrified because he knows that time has come for him to die. And then all of a sudden, when your time of your death comes, they say everything flashes in front of you, all the sins and everything you have committed. So when he's just thinking at that point, now, people always say, why do you want to pray to God ahead of time? You can always wait, right? Wait till you're 60 years old, and then or 70 years, whatever age, right? You can pick and say you can then start doing. The problem with some of that, and this is just my view, problem with some of that is when the time comes, what is the first thought that's going to come to your mind, right? And it's very easy. You can just imagine yourself when you're flying, the flight is about to crash. The first thing that comes is, have I sent all the details to my wife? I hope, have I noted everything? Does she know my laptop password, right? All these things start going in your mind, right? It is normal for every human being, right? When you're suddenly at that point, so at that point, when you're about to die, you never think of the God. The only way you think of the God is if it's been imbibed in you, right? It's been kind of built into you all this time. So anyway, that is one of the rationale. But here, what happens to him is he's so scared that these people have come and all these things flash in front of him, that out of extreme fear, he calls out his son. He calls out his son, whose name is Narayana, right? So Juhava Narayana Namakam Sutam. So he keeps calling Narayana, Narayana. He keeps calling out for his son, who's not nearby, but he keeps yelling for his name out of fear and out of desire as well. So Sa Mrityu Kale Yamaraja Kinkaran, comma, Yamaraja Kinkaran, comma. So next word, you have to go all the way till that in. So Bhayankaram Strin, up to in, you have to go, and then you can break at that na. So Bhayankaran Strin Abhilakshayan Bhiya. You can break at that na. Abhilakshayan Bhiya. Samrityukale Yamaraja Kinkaran Bhayankaran Strin Abhilakshayan Bhiya.
Samrutyukale Yamaraja Kinkaran Bhayankaram Strin Abhilakshayan Bhiya. Samrutyukale.
We'll see once again. Bhayanka, not yanka. Bhayanka.
Bhayankaram Strin Abhilakshayan Bhiya. Samrutyukale Yamaraja Kinkaran Bhayankaram Strin Abhilakshayan Bhiya.
समृत्युकाले यमराजकिङ्करान् भयङ्करान् त्रि अभिलक्षयन् भिया.
This Gopiji, this is there. Bhayankaran Streen is.
Okay, it's 3 or 3.
No, it's a Bhayankaran Streen. It's a together. It doesn't come as 3. It's a Streen in. So
Okay.
Bhayankaran Streen Abhilakshayan.
समृत्युकाले यमराजकिङ्करान् भयङ्करान् स्त्रीन् अभिलक्षयन् भिया.
Pura Manak Twat Smriti Vasana Bhalat. So I forgot to tell that important thing there. So Bhattacharya is saying the only way he was able to call out that name Narayana at that time is Twat Smriti. He used to be in his past lives and in this life, he used to be a ardent devotee of yours. So because of all the Smriti that he has done for you, Vasana Bhala, due to the strength of the the scent of your words, right, of your name, because he's been prayed to you so much in the past, that's the only reason he was able to say your name at the very end, right? That's why he was able to call out to his son and not anybody else. So that was that thing there. So Twat Smriti Vasana Balat, comma, Juhava Narayana Namakam Sutam. Puramanak Twat Smriti Vasana Balat Juhava Narayana Namakam Sutam.
Puramanak Tvatsmruti Vasana Balat Juhava Narayaneeyam Sutam.
Narayana Namakam.
Narayana Namakam Sutam. Puramanak Tvatsmruti Vasana Balat Juhava Narayana Namakam Sutam.
पुरामनाक्त्वत्स्मृति वासना बलात् जुहाव नारायण नामकं सुतं. पुरामनाक्त्वत्स्मृति वासना बलात् जुहाव नारायण नामकं सुतं.
Stanza 4. Durashayasyapi tadatva nirgatattvadiyya namakshara vaibhavat purobhiphetur bhavadiyya parshadhaha chaturbhujah pita pata manoramaha. So even though he was a very evil-minded person in his last several years and he has committed a lot of sin and a lot of bad acts, because of your namaksharam, because of the letters of your name, matra vaibhavat, so because of the strength of your name that he actually chanted right at the time of death and out of fear and out of anxiety, so then in front of the Yamadutas then come your Bhavadiya Parshadaha, your messengers, the Lord's messengers, because they heard him call out the Lord's name at the time of death. So they then appeared in front of the Yamadutas and Chaturbhuja. So all the Lord's messengers are also four-handed, Chaturbhuja, just like exactly like Narayana, how you visualize. The same. So they're exactly like Chaturbhuja, Pita Pata. They also are wearing a yellow robe, Manorama, and they all looking handsome and beautiful, right? At this time. So the Lord's messengers are now coming in front of him. So Durasha Yasyapi. So you have to say that together. Durasha Yasyapi Tadatva Nirgata, and then put a plus. Nirgata Tvadiya Namakshara Matra Vaibhavat. Durashayasyapi tadatva nirgata tvadiya namakshara matra vaibhavat.
Durashayasyapi tadatva nirgata tvadiya namakshara matra vaibhavat. Durashayasyapi tadatva nirgata tvadiya namakshara matra vaibhavat.
Durashayasyapi tadatvanirgata tvadiya namakshara matra vaibhavat. Durashayasyapi tadatvanirgata tvadiya namakshara matra vaibhavat.
Purobhi Pethur Bhavadiya parshadaha, comma, chatur bhujaha. Is there? Put a if sound. Chatur bhujaf. Pita pata. Some books have manoharaha. Some books have manoramaha. So we're going to change it to manoramaha. So if you have manoharaha, just change it to ramaha. Pita pata manoramaha. Puro bifetur bhavadiya parshadaha. Chaturbhujah pita pata manoramaha.
पुरोऽपि पेतुर्भवदीयपार्षदाः चतुर्भुजाः पीतपटा मनोरमाः पुरोऽपि पेतुर्भवदीयपार्षदाः चतुर्भुजाः पीतपटा मनोरमाः
पुरोभिपेतुर्भवदीयपार्षदाः चतुर्भुजाः पीतपटा मनोरमाः पुरोभिपेतुर्भवदीयपार्षदाः चतुर्भुजाः पीतपटा मनोरमाः.
So we'll switch. I think I had Deepa, right? Deepa and Meera.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
Stanza fine. Ahum cha sampashya vikarshato bhatan vimunchate tyarurudhur baladami nivaritaste cha bhavajanaistadha tadiya papam nikhilam yavedayan. So when his soul was about to be pulled out of his body, so just then the emissaries of the Lord are coming, and they come and ask the Yamadhutas, right? They come and ask him, hold on, just first for a moment stop, and then say, tell me why, what are the mistakes he has done? Why are you taking him away right now? What is the problem here? So at this point, the Yamadutas, there's a long conversation that happens between them both. So the Yamadutas are saying, you all appear very learned, and you all know that with all these actions, he's committed a lot of sins and everything. So at the time, the Vishnu messengers then say, okay, I want to know what all sins he has done. So Yamaraja is a fair person, so let me hear from you what all he has done, but hold on right now and narrate. So the Yamadutas, of course, go and narrate all the sins that Ajamila has done, right? Saying, okay, these are all the things he has done because of which, he needs to be punished, and he needs to kind of go through his, he has to pay for it, right? Essentially. And then so they also ask him what is right and what is wrong. So the Vishnu Duta asks him, tell me what is right, what is wrong. So they then, Yamaduta say, whatever is prescribed in the Vedas, whatever is said, that is dharmam. That is the baseline, right? So anything which is, you go against it, that is what they consider as not, it's not right. So that is a reference point they actually give in this thing. So amum cha sampashya vikarshato bhatan, comma, vimunchate. So this word, we can't break it. You have to say it together till rurudur. So vimunchatetya rurudur. Okay, so till then it's together. You can't break it, but you can mark it separately and keep. But vimunchatetya rurudur baladami. Amum cha sampashya vikarshatho bhatan vimunchatetya rurudur baladami. Go ahead, Meera.
Amum cha sampashya vikarsato batan vimuncyater rurudur baladami. Amum cha sampashya vikarsato batan vimuncyater rurudur baladami.
The first one, Vikar Shato, Sha, and the first word, Vikar Shato. And then Vimuncha Tetya.
Vimunchatetya.
Yeah. Good, Deepa.
Amum cha sampashaya vikarshato bhatan vimunchate tya rurudur baladami. Amum cha sampashya vikarshato bhatan vimunchate tya rurudur baladami.
Nivaritaste cha bhavaj janais tada. So ij bhavaj janais tada, comma, tadiya papam nikhilam nyavedayan. Nivaritaste cha bhavaj janais tada, tadiya papam nikhilam nyavedayan.
Nivaritaste cha bhavajanaistada tadiya papam nikilam nyavedayan.
Tadiya, fourth line, tadiya papam.
Oh, second line. Tadiya papam. No. Nivaritaste cha bhavajanaistada tadiya papam nikilam nyavedayan.
Nivaritaste cha bhavajjanaiस्तदा tadiya papam nikilam naye vedyan
No, nyavedayan.
navedayan nivaritaste cha bhavajjanaiस्तदा tadiya papam nikilam naye vadan
Nyavedayan.
navedayan.
Stanza 6. Bhavantu papani katham tu nishkrite krite pibho dhandanamasti panditaha na nishkrite kim vidita bhavadrisham iti prabho tvat purusha babhashire. So tvat purusha, so your messengers of the Lord, babhashire, they told or asked the Yamadutas that let there be, oh learned one, they actually respect the Yamadutas because the Yama is the Lord of Dharma, right? So he's always the righteous person. He always does the right thing. So you say, oh righteous people, let there be sins. Papani, I know he has committed sins. But you also know that once you do an atonement for a sin, that sin has to go away. So how can you then punish him for an atonement he has already done? So here they're referring to the fact that at the time when he is in severe trouble and severe pain, out of such anxiety, he has called the Lord's name, and he has been calling the Lord's name for such a long time. So by doing that, he is repented at the time because he had the flash of all the bad things he has done, and he has now repented for it. So once he's repented for it, how can he still be punished? And you as learned people should already know this. So don't you know about it? So bhavantu papani katham tu nishkrite, and then put a plus. Kritepi bho dandanam asti. You can break at that ma. Dandanam asti panditaha. Bhavantu papani katham tu nishkrite kritepi bho dandanam asti panditaha.
Bhavantu papani katam tu nishkrite kritepi bodhandanamasti panditaha. Bhavantu papani katam tu nishkrite kritepi bodhandanamasti panditaha.
Bhavantu papani katham tu nishkrite krite pibho dandana me astita panditaha.
Dandanam asti panditaha.
Dandanam asti panditaha. Bhavantu papani katham tu nishkrite krite pibho dandanam astita panditaha.
You're putting an extra tha, asti, not asti. Yeah.
Krite pibho dandam asti panditaha.
Na nishkritihi is there. Put a ich sound. Nishkritih kim vidita bhava drisham. Put a im at the end of that line and a comma. Bhava drisham, comma. Next line, if you have miti, remove that ma, make it iti. Iti means thus. Iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire. Na nishkritih kim vidita bhava drisham iti prabho tvat purusha babhashire.
Na nishkritif kim vidita bhavadrisham iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire.
Purusha bhabhashire.
Purusha bhabashire. न निष्कृतिः किं विदिता भवादृशाम् इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भवाशिरे.
அவன சொல்றாங்க.
அது சாவா நாவா
செகண்ட் லைன் ஃபர்ஸ்ட்.
செகண்ட் அந்த தேர்ட் லைன்ல
Uh,
சா நிஷ்கிருத்தின்னு போட்டிருக்கு. நான்
no,
நிஷ்கிருதி
na nishkriti. No,
நான்
na.
நான் நிஷ்கிருதி. ஓகே.
Yeah.
न निष्कृति किं विदिता भवा दृशाम् इति प्रभो तत्पुरुषा भाषिरे.
Twat purusha. That is the first, not that. It's twat purusha. TVAT. Twat.
न निष्कृता किं विदिता भवा दृशाम् इति प्रभो तत्पुरुषा भभाषिरे.
Deepa, and the last line is twat purusha.
इति प्रभो तत्
No, not that. Twat. TVAT. Twat.
इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाषिरे.
Correct. Stanza 7. Shrute smritibhyam vihita vratadayah punanti papam na lunanti vasanam ananta sevatu nikrintate dvahim iti prabho tvat purusha bhabhashire. So Shruti means like it's like the Vedas. Nobody knows or nobody wrote it. Nobody knows where it came. It was heard, right? So the Vedas are referred as Shruti. Smriti means what people wrote out of their own intellect. So you have, Manu Smriti, Narada Smriti, a lot of Smritis. So these are, you have a author, you have an origin, right? And then that person wrote it. So that's Smriti. So what it says is both in the Shruti and the Smriti, what it has said is, it has given you ways that you can actually atone for the sins, like we discussed at the beginning of the class, right? It has told you what you need to do it. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't remove the vasanam. It doesn't remove your tendency to not commit that sin again. That doesn't remove. It only eradicates what you've already done. And the example they give in Bhagavatam is just like, how when you're in your sleep and you're having a dream, you don't realize that, let's say you are a pilot in your dream. You don't realize that actually I'm not a pilot. At that point, you are a pilot. That's what you are. And you behave like that, right? So similarly, he says is when you take this birth and you get a body, and like we said earlier, when you're doing actions which are expecting fruit, there is impossible for you not to commit sins. You will end up committing it because it doesn't, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're always expecting some result. You don't get the result. You continue to do something, and that kind of drives you into that circle. However, he says Ananta Seva, devotion to the Lord, a devotion to the Vishnu here is the only thing which is Dvaim. It not only eradicates the sin which you have committed, it also prevents you from committing sins again. So that devotion has to come. And iti prabho tvat purusha bhavashire, your messengers told him. So Shruti smritibhyam vihita vratadayah, punanti papam na lunanti vasanam. Shruti smritibhyam vihita vratadayah punanti papam na lunanti vasanam.
Shruti smritibhyam vihita vratadayah punanti papam na lunanti vasanam. Shruti smritibhyam vihita vratadayah punanti papam na lunanti vasanam.
श्रुति स्मृतिं भयविहिता व्रतधायः पुनन्ति पापन लुनन्ति वासनाम्.
So the first line, Shruti smritibhyam.
श्रुति स्मृतिभ्यां
Smritibhyam. Smritibhyam.
श्रुति स्मृतिभ्यां विहिता व्रतधायः पुनन्ति पापन लुनन्ति वासनाम्.
Punanti papam. Second line. Papam.
पुनन्ति पापं न ल्याग.
Papam na lunanti vasanam.
Okay. पुनन्ति पापं न लुनन्ति वासनम्.
Vasanam.
वासनाम्.
Yeah.
पुनन्ति पापं न लुनन्ति वासनाम्.
Ananta seva tu nikrintati dvayim. Put a im there. Dvayim, comma. Next line again, remove the ma. Iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire. Ananta seva tu nikrintati dvayim. Iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire.
Ananta seva tu nikrintati dvayim iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire. Ananta seva tu nikrintati dvayim iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire.
Ananta seva tu
Nikrintati. Nikrintati.
Ananta seva tu nikrintati dvayim iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire. Ananta seva tu nikrintatim dvayim iti prabho tvat purusha bhabashire.
Stanza 8. Anena bhojanma sahasra kotibhihi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritih krita yadagrahin nama bhayakulo harehe ite prabho tvat purusha bhabashire. So the question that comes here is, even though he said Narayana multiple times, what if it didn't mean the Lord Narayana? What if he meant his son Narayana, right? So the example they give is, when you take a medicine, do you know how that medicine works? You don't know how that medicine works, right? The doctor is telling you, you take this medicine and you just take that medicine and then you get cured. So you don't need to know how the medicine needs to work for the medicine to cure you, right? So that is exactly the comparison they give is, similarly, the more you chant the Lord's name and you keep chanting it, it will have an effect. You don't need to know how that effect is going to be. You will have that exact effect. And of course, in olden days, they used to keep such names, right? So that's why they used to, and I know some of you may understand this joke, some of you may not. One of my uncle's name is Ramakrishnan. It's got Rama and Krishna in it, right? Both of it is there. They used to call him Kicha. That's what they used to call him, right? So it's like when grandfather kept that nice name of Ramakrishnan, but nobody used to call him Ramakrishnan. Everybody used to call him Kicha, right? But anyway, that is just a joke. But the thing is, the more and more they used to keep such names so that you're constantly calling the Lord's name on a daily basis. That's what they're saying. He doesn't need to know what the impact of this is. He's uttered the name because of Bhayakule. When he was overcome by fear, he could have done anything he wanted, but he still uttered the Lord's name. And by doing that, he was able to eradicate all his sins. Iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire. So anena bho janma sahasra kotibhihi. So kind of all the koti papams that he has done. Sahasra kotibhihi, comma, kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritihi. Is there, put a ich sound, nishkritih krita. Anena bho janma sahasra kotibhihi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritih krita.
Anena bho janma sahasra kotibhihi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritif krita. Anena bho janma sahasra kotibhihi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritif krita.
Anena bho janma sahasrakotibhi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritik krita.
Kotibhihi. First, kotibhihi.
Anena bho janma sahasrakotibhi kriteshu papeshwapi nishkritik krita.
Yada grahin nama. So double na coming there. Grahin nama bhaya kulo harehe. Put a visarga there and a comma. Harehe. Next line, the riti that you have, make it iti. Iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire. Yada grahin nama bhaya kulo harehe. Iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire.
Yadagrahin nama bhayakulo harehe iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire. Yadagrahin nama भयाकुलो हरेः इति प्रभो तत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे
यदग्रहीनाम भयाकुलो हरेः इति प्रभोत्पत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे यद्ग्रहीनाम भयाकुलो हरेः इति प्रभोत्पत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे.
Answer 9. नृणाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घौगान् महिमास्य तादृशः यताग्निरेधांसि यतौषधं गदान् इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे. So Mukunda, the name is, the word root is coming from the word mukti. The one who gives liberation is Mukunda. So mukti dhadati iti Mukunda. That's the meaning of the word Mukunda. So here he says, even that kind of continuation of what we discussed earlier, right? So even though somebody chants the name of Mukunda, even without knowing the meaning or even without knowing the effect of it, it is going to do its work, just like how we said a medicine cures it. Similarly, a fire, it doesn't care what it is there. It is just going to go and just as a fire burns the fuel, it doesn't need to know, right, what it is. It just burns it. Similarly, chanting the name of Mukunda is going to eliminate all the sins and all the things that you have. Iti Prabho. So next, the first word, Nrinama Budhyapi. If you want to break, you can break it at that im. Nrinam Abudhyapi. But you don't have to explicitly break it, but that's one place to break. So Nrinama Budhyapi Mukunda Kirtanam, comma, Dahatya Ghaugan Mahimasya Tadrishaha. Nrinama Budhyapi Mukunda Kirtanam Dahatya Ghaugan Mahimasya Tadrishaha.
नृणाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घौगान् महिमास्य तादृशः नृणाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घौगान् महिमास्य तादृशः
निर्नाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घोघान महिमास्य तादृश्यः निर्नाम बुद्ध्यापि मुकुन्द कीर्तनं दहत्य घौघान महिमास्य तादृश्यः.
I think you're saying Tadrishyah. There's no ya there, right? So Tadrishaha.
तादृशः.
Yeah. Yatagni redhamsi. So that you get the right place to break it is ir, but that will make it complicated for you. So yatagni, remember the word agni. So yatagni redhamsi yataushadham gadan. Put a in there, gadan, comma, iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire. Yathagni redhamsi yataushadham gadan iti prabho tvatpurusha bhabashire.
यताग्निरेदांसि यतौ सदां गदान् इति प्रभो त्वत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे.
And the third line, sorry, yataushadham.
Yataushadham.
Yeah.
यताग्निरेधांसि यतौषधं गदान् इति प्रभो तत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे.
यताग्निधासीं यथौषधं गदान् इति प्रभोत्पत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे.
Keep on the first word. Yatagni redhamsi.
यथाग्निरेदांसि यशो यथो औषधं गदान् इति प्रभोत्पत्पुरुषा भभाशिरे.
And the aushadam, you can't break it as aushadam like that. It is yathaushadam. It's one word. It is already joined. Okay. Yathaushadam. Yeah. Stanza 10. Iti hritayiryamya bhatairapasrite bhavat bhatanam cha gane tirohite Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat bhatairaso. So when all this conversation is happening, right? So at the time Ajamila is then coming to his, he realizes, right? He says, I used to be such a devoted, such a pious man. I used to be following all, I had my senses and my mind in control. I was doing all righteous things. But then I eventually ended up abandoning my parents. I abandoned my wife. I abandoned my kids. And then I came and then I did all these unfair means of generating wealth, right? And then I came in such a distorted way. And now he finally comes to his senses. So the Yamadutas don't take him right now, and the Lord's messengers also leave. And Ajamila then realizes everything, and then the story actually continues, saying that he then goes to Haridwar, and then he completely, he dedicates himself, and then eventually he passes away, right? So he realizes his mistakes and all that, and then he continues to be devoted to the Lord. And eventually, Bhavat Padam, eventually he reaches your feet. So iti ritair, up to that you say it together. Iti ritair yamya bhataira pasrite, comma, bhavat bhatanam cha gane tirohite. Iti ritair yamya bhataira pasrite bhavat bhatanam cha gane tirohite.
Iti ritairyamya bhatairapasrute bhavat bhatanam cha ghane tirohite. Iti ritairyamya bhatairapasrate bhavat bhatanam cha ghane tirohite.
Iti riteryam bhatairapasute bhavat dhatana cha ganotiha tirohite.
And the line bhavat bhatanam cha gane tirohite.
Bhavat bhatana. Iti riteyar
yamya. Iti ritair
Iti riteryamya bhatairapasute bhavat bhatanam chagane tirohite.
Bhavat smritim kanchana kalam acharan. In break it datma. Kalam acharan, comma, bhavat padam prapi bhavat bhatairasau. Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat bhatairasau.
Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat bhatairasau. Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat bhatairasau.
Iti Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat ghatairaso. Bhavat smritim kanchana kalamacharan bhavat padam prapi bhavat ghatairaso.
Bhatairaso. Bhatairaso.
Bhavat bhatairaso.
Stanza 11. Swakinkara vedana shankito yamaha twadangri bhakteshu nagamyatamiti swakiya bhrityan ashishikshadutchakaihi sadeva vatalayanath pahimam. So then all the Yama messengers go back and they narrate all the incidents to Yama, and then Yama says, okay, so anyone who's devoted to you, Twadangri Bhakteshu, people who are devoted to your feet, people who are devoted to you a lot, na ghamyatamiti, you cannot go near them. I mean, you of course have death, but then that you will not, the sins you will not have. So it'll, so that effect will not be there. Then Yama is instructing his messengers as well. So that Lord, you came to help Ajamila that day, right? Even though he had committed all these sins, when he called out your name, you came to help him. So similarly, help me also out here, who is now struggling from all these diseases. With that, Bhattacharya ends this chapter. So Swa Kinkaravedhana. So that word is together. Swa Kinkaravedhana Shankito Yamaha. Put a visarga there and a comma. Yamaha. Next line, remove the is. Twadangri Bhakteshu Na Gamyatam iti. Swakinkaravedana Shankito Yamaha Twadangri Bhakteshu Na Gamyatam iti.
Swakinkara Veda
Ravedhana.
Ravedana. Swakinkara Veda
Vedhana. Swakinkaravedhana.
Swakinkara Vedana Sankito Yamaha Tvadangri Bhakteshu Nagamyatamiti. Swakankara Vedana Sankito
Swakinkaravedana.
Swakinkara Vedana Sankito Yamaha Tvadangri Bhakteshu Nagamyatamiti.
Swakinkaravedana shankito shan adena word
Shankito. Shankito.
shankito yamaha twadhangri bhakteshu nagamyata miti. Swakinkaravedana shankito yamaha twadhangri bhakteshu nagamyata miti.
Swakiya Bhrityan. You break it at that na Bhrityan. And the next word which is going to come, remember it, practice it, because it's also going to come in the 24th chapter. Ashi Shikshad Uchakaihi. So Ashi Shikshad Uchakaihi. Okay, so you can break it at Bhrityan. Ashi Shikshad Uchakaihi. Ashi Shikshad means to teach, instructing. Uchakaihi, comma, Sa Deva Vatalaya Natha Pahimam. Swakiya Bhrityanasi Shikshad Uchakaihi Sadeva Vatalaya Natha Pahimam.
Swakiya Bhrityan Asikshya Saduchaikaihi.
No, you repeat it. After Bhrityan, right? So you get Swakiya Bhrityan.
Swakiya Bhrityan, okay.
Okay. Ashi Shikshad.
Ashi Shikshad.
So there are two she's coming, right? Ashi Shikshad.
Duchakaihi, okay.
Ashi Shikshad Uchakaihi. Then.
Uchakaihi, okay. Swakiya Bhrityan Ashishikshad Duchakaihi Sadeva Vatalayanata Pahimam Pahimam.
Ashi Shikshad you are saying, right? So then the next word has to be Uchakaihi.
Uchakaihi, okay.
Okay, so break that do into id and u. Okay.
Okay, do, okay. Swakiya Bhrityan Ashishikshya Duchakaihi Sadeva Vatalayanata Pahimam.
Swakiya bhrityan ashiksha uchakaihi sadeva vatalaya nata pahimam.
Deepa, you don't have to try that portion again. Ashi,
Yes.
Ashi, A-S-H-I, Ashi, Shikshad.
Shikshad.
Yeah.
Okay. Swakiya bhrityan ashishikshad uchakaihi. Swakiya bhrityan ashishikshad uchakaihi sadeva vatalaya nata pahimam.
Shri Krishna Parabrahmane. Okay, we'll stop it here. So the next 24 and 25, right? So those are considered to be some really tough chapters. At least you'll find it tough initially for sure. I'll give you forewarning. But eventually, like you saw people who chanted today, they all went through it, just raced through it, right? So eventually you'll get to that point, but 24 and 25 are tough. So what I normally do is I send the meaning ahead of time. So I'll send you an MP3 of 24th chapter meaning ahead of time. So it's Narsimha Avataram, right? 24 and 25. So Narsimha Avataram, it has to be Goram, right? So that way 25th chapter is like, it's a lot of tongue twisters. So 24th, I'll send it by next class, and then we'll just focus on chanting 24th chapter so we can go at a reasonable pace. And then the next class, we'll do 25. Okay. So with that, we'll end today's class. Sandhanandhavabodhatmakamanupamitam kaladeshavadebhyam nirmuktam nityamuktam nigamashatasahasrena nirbhasyamanam aspashtam drishtamatre punarurupurusharthatmakam brahmatattvam tattavad bhati sakshat gurupavanapure hanta bhagyam janaha काहेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि।